Hello everybody, this is my third video in the GCSE Python computer science tutorial. This video I'm going to be going over variables and like types and conversions between types. So first thing you want to do, like usual, is open up your Python and say new file. And I would always click options and then show line numbers, just so you got these line numbers, very useful. And so let's talk about variables now. So you've almost definitely actually seen variables before, even if you don't know they're variables. If you do something like this, and then say that obviously which part of this is the variable, is this at the beginning, name. So a variable is simply just a way of describing a label like this for a piece of memory that contains whatever you get out of this. So another thing I can do is simply just that. And so what that does is make name here equal to hello. So now this label name stores whatever is on the other side as equals. And I can access that again using a print. So I can say print name, and notice no quotes, because it's a variable, not one of these. And I'll tell you what this is called in a second, this green text. So as you can see, that just says hello. So this is a string. It's good to remember this. A string is just some text. It could be anything. It's anything as long as it's text, right? So I can put anything in here, right? And that's just text. And something important you need to remember for your exams, definitely, is if I want to make name a string but not have anything in it, I can just say name equals quote quote, and this makes an empty string. So Python knows this is a string, but I don't have to put anything in it yet. So another important type is integer. So this is just a number. So I can say name equals 1. And you can see it's printed 1. But this 1 is different to this one, because this is the number 1. Right, when Python sees that, it's like, that is 1 as a number. This is effectively the letter 1. This is treated exactly the same as if this was an A. It's just the letter 1, basically, is how I think about it. It's not really a 1, even if it looks like it. It's treated the same as any of the alphabet would be, or weird characters. There's also one other number type that's important, which is called a float. A float is basically just a different way of storing numbers that lets you have decimals. And in the same way, an integer, in quotes, is not an integer, the same goes with floats. This is the letter 1, the letter full stop, and the letter 5, not 1.5. Floats are very important because integers cannot have decimals. So if you see anything with decimals, even if it's just 1.0, this is a float. You can do the same thing as you did with the empty string with integers and floats. For like an empty integer, it would just be 0. For an empty float, it would be 0.0, because this dot 0 says, this has got decimal places, so it's a float. So there's one important thing you need to know about the relationship between these. This print takes in a string. So if name equals 1, yes, this is an integer. What's happening here is basically Python's been a bit clever and it's seen I'm putting in an integer, but I can just convert that into a string. But you can't always rely on this. This won't always work. So to convert an integer like this into a string, you can simply type str, short for string, bracket, and then pass in whatever other type there is. So that can be an integer, that can be a float, or any of the other types that exist in Python. So here we just want to turn name actually into a string, and then we can just put this in here. So as you can see, I basically made a sort of stacked statement here, but all this is actually very simple, is print the string form of name, which is obviously 1 but in quotes because it's a string. So another very important one of these conversions is int. So let's say I have this, for instance, and I wanted to turn it into an integer. I can just say int 1, int name, and this will convert this to this. So it will turn it from a string into an integer. And so what's very important about this is in tests, you'll often see something like this. So you'll have like a number variable, and that will be equal to an input, and then just like enter number. But there's a problem here, because what input gives you, whatever I type in here, even if it's numbers, this actually gives back a string, not an integer. So if I wanted to print this out, +2, you can see once I type it in, I get an error. And this last line is the most important. Type error. You can only concatenate str, not int, to str. You don't really need to know what this means yet, especially not this big word, concatenate. But what this is trying to tell you is this is a string, and that means it can't combine with this int. But I want to add 2 to this. So I can't just put this in string and then boom, they're the same type. Because what that does, so I put number 8 in, it just sticks this 2 on the end. That's not what we want. What we instead want, and you'll see this in your exams, is immediately as we get it out of the input statement, we use one of these int conversions to convert whatever string comes out of here straight into an integer and into here. And then, as you can see, it adds 2. So a full explanation of what's going on here. I have an input statement that gives me back a string, which is just some text. But we want to add another number to what we get back from input. But we can't do that if it's just text. So we convert it into a number using this int, put that into the number variable, and then print it out +2, which is another integer. And this wouldn't work if this was a string, because you can't add strings and integers. This is a good example of why you would want to convert types. Now there's one more thing I'm going to show you here, and that is constants. So constants can be recognised because of their full caps names. So all the constant is a variable that will not change. So by me saying constant equals 20, that means this constant variable should be equal to 20 for the entire way down. So a good example of this would be something like, if I have a program that sorts pencils, and I sort them by colour, but there's always a fixed amount of pencils, which is 20. No point in me writing 20 everywhere in the code, because if for some reason something goes wrong, like one of my pencils breaks, or I get a new pencil and I'm changing the actual code, it would be inconvenient to go through every point in the code and change it from 20 to something else. So an easiest mistake to make with constants is something like this, where you have an input statement or something like that. This shouldn't happen. This is not what constants are used for. The value of a constant should be written into the code when it is made. It shouldn't be based off anything. Even if you know it won't change after you've defined it, you shouldn't use a constant. A constant is just going to be one value that exists for the entire code and will never change. If you think it will change, or it has a value defined that might change per run of the program, do not use a constant. There are only very specific cases where you need a constant. So just keep them in mind, but don't concentrate on them. So for a quick summary, what we talked about is variables, like name equals reduc. We've talked about changing types, so I can have name was 3, I could say str name to make it into a string, or if it was the string with the letter 3 in it, it would turn that into an integer. And we briefly covered constants, which are variables that will not change. So if you found this video helpful, please remember to like, and you can subscribe if you want to get notified when the next video comes out. Feel free to comment if you've got any questions or would just like to say thank you, and goodbye.